The words hung in the air like poison. "He won't even realize what he's signing," I heard my daughter say on the phone. A week later, those words still echoed in my mind as I sat across from her at our weekly Sunday dinner, watching her smile and chat as if nothing was wrong. As if she hadn't been plotting behind my back. I'm Martin Caldwell, 67 years old, and I've spent my entire life building something from nothing. Growing up in a small town outside of Pittsburgh, I learned early that nothing comes easy. My father worked in the steel mills until his back gave out, and my mother cleaned houses to make ends meet. I put myself through community college, working nights at a gas station, eventually starting my own construction company. 45 years of early mornings, calloused hands, and sleepless nights worrying about payroll. 45 years of building a life for my family. Sarah, my wife of 38 years, had passed away 2 years ago after a long battle with cancer. We'd raised 2 children together, my daughter, Rebecca, now 36, and my son, Daniel, 34. I'd always thought we were close. That I had taught them the value of hard work, honesty, and family. Now I wasn't so sure. "Dad, can you pass the potatoes?" Rebecca's voice pulled me from my thoughts. I handed her the serving dish, studying her face. She had her mother's features, the same honey brown eyes, the same smile that used to light up my world. Now that smile seemed like a mask hiding something darker. "How's work going?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Busy as always," she replied. Rebecca was a real estate agent at one of the top firms in Boston. "The market's finally picking up again after winter." I nodded, watching as she served herself, then passed the dish to her husband, Eric. I'd never particularly warmed to Eric. He worked in finance, something to do with hedge funds that he explained once in a condescending tone that made it clear he thought it was beyond my comprehension. Always dressed in expensive suits, always checking his phone at family gatherings. Always living just a little beyond their means, from what I could tell. "And how about you, Dad?" Daniel asked from across the table. "Still keeping busy in retirement?" Retirement. The word still felt foreign to me, even a year in. I'd sold my company to my longtime foreman, Mike, ensuring all my employees would keep their jobs. The sale had left me comfortable, not wealthy by Boston standards, but secure. I owned my home outright, a 3-bedroom colonial in Lexington that Sarah and I had bought 30 years ago when it was still affordable, now worth well over $1 million in this market. I had my pension, Social Security, and the proceeds from the business. "Busy enough," I said. "Been doing some consulting for Mike when he needs it. And I've been fixing up the cabin." The cabin was my pride and joy, a piece of land with a small house by a lake in New Hampshire that I'd bought 20 years ago and had been improving ever since. It was where Sarah and I had planned to spend our golden years before cancer changed everything. "The cabin," Rebecca repeated, exchanging a quick glance with Eric that I pretended not to notice. "How's that coming along?" "Almost finished the new dock," I said. "Just in time for summer." "You know, Dad," Daniel began carefully, "you shouldn't be doing heavy construction at your age. Your back." "My back is fine," I cut him off, perhaps more sharply than intended. "Been building things my whole life, don't see any reason to stop now." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. My son's wife, Jennifer, jumped in with a story about their 5-year-old daughter's dance recital, and the moment passed. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It had been a week since I'd accidentally overheard Rebecca's phone conversation, standing in her hallway while returning from the bathroom. A conversation she clearly hadn't meant for me to hear. "He won't even realize what he's signing," she had said, her voice low. "The lawyer says once it's done, it's done. We'll handle Dad better than Mom did." I hadn't heard who was on the other end of the line, but I had my suspicions. And I hadn't confronted her, not yet. First, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. Dinner dragged on, each minute feeling like an hour. Rebecca brought out apple pie, store-bought, not homemade like her mother would have made, and coffee. As we ate, the conversation turned to my recent doctor's appointment. "So what did Dr. Lewis say?" Rebecca asked, her tone casual but her eyes watchful. I shrugged. "Same as always. Blood pressure's a bit high, cholesterol could be better." "Nothing new." "Did he say anything about the memory tests?" Daniel pressed. "The memory tests. 6 months ago, I'd forgotten Daniel's birthday. It had been an honest mistake. I'd been at the cabin without my phone for a few days, and the date had slipped my mind. But that single lapse had apparently been cause for concern, and both my children had insisted I see a neurologist." "All normal," I replied, which was the truth. Dr. Lewis had found nothing concerning about my cognitive function. Said I'm sharp as a tack for my age. "For your age," Eric repeated with a smirk that made my hand tighten around my fork. "Well, that's good to hear," Rebecca said quickly. "We just worry about you, Dad, living in that big house all alone." And there it was. The opening I'd been waiting for. "Actually," I said, setting down my coffee cup, "I've been thinking about that. About the future." Both my children perked up immediately, exchanging glances. "I think it might be time to consider downsizing," I continued carefully. "The house is too big for just me, and the property taxes keep going up." "That's exactly what we've been saying," Rebecca exclaimed, a little too enthusiastically. "It makes perfect sense, Dad." "I've been looking into some of those active senior communities," Daniel added. "Really nice ones, with golf courses and pools. You'd have people your own age around." I nodded slowly, watching their eager faces. "Maybe. I've also been thinking about just moving to the cabin full-time." Their expressions fell in perfect unison. "The cabin?" Rebecca's voice had an edge to it. "Dad, that's so isolated. What if something happened? You'd be all alone out there." "It's not that isolated," I countered. "There are neighbors nearby, just not on top of each other like here. And I like the peace and quiet." "But what about medical care?" Daniel asked. "The nearest hospital must be what, an hour away?" I shrugged. "I'm not an invalid, Daniel. I can drive. And there's a clinic in town for minor things." "I just don't think it's practical," Rebecca said firmly. "Anyway, Eric and I have been talking, and we had a different idea." I raised my eyebrows, waiting. "We've been thinking of buying a bigger house," she continued. "There's a beautiful place in Newton with an in-law apartment that would be perfect for you. You'd have your own space, but we'd be right there if you needed anything. And you could help with the mortgage," Eric added, earning a sharp look from my daughter. "What Eric means," Rebecca said quickly, "is that you could contribute what you'd get from selling your house, and then you'd never have to worry about maintenance or being alone again." I took a sip of my coffee, buying time. So this was their play. Get me to sell my house, my biggest asset, and sink the money into their new property. Property that would be in their names, not mine. "That's an interesting idea," I said neutrally. "I'll have to think about it." "There's no rush," Rebecca assured me, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "But the real estate market is really hot right now. You could get top dollar for your place if you moved quickly." "We could help you go through Mom's things," Daniel offered, as if that was the main obstacle. As if I hadn't been living with Sarah's memories for 2 years now, finding both pain and comfort in the traces she'd left behind. "Like I said, I'll think about it," I repeated, firmer this time. The conversation moved on, but I remained distracted, turning over that overheard phone call in my mind. He won't even realize what he's signing. What exactly were they planning to have me sign? A power of attorney? A deed transfer? Were my own children trying to take advantage of me? The thought was almost too painful to bear. These were the kids I'd taught to ride bikes, the ones whose college tuitions I'd paid through years of overtime and side jobs. The ones who'd held my hands at Sarah's funeral as I fell apart. Could they really be plotting against me now? After dinner, as Rebecca and Eric cleared the table, I excused myself to use the bathroom. Instead of turning toward the hallway bathroom, however, I slipped into Rebecca's home office. My heart was pounding. I'd never snooped through my daughter's things before, but I needed answers. Her desk was neat and organized, just like she'd always been even as a teenager. I carefully opened drawers, looking for anything that might explain what she'd been talking about on the phone. In the bottom drawer, beneath a stack of folders, I found what I was looking for, a file labeled Dad, Options. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside were printouts about guardianship proceedings, power of attorney forms, and information about cognitive decline in the elderly. There were notes in Rebecca's handwriting about the value of my house, my retirement accounts, and even the cabin property. Most disturbing was a letter from a lawyer I'd never heard of, outlining strategies for asset protection that seemed more focused on transferring my property than protecting anything. I heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly returned the file to its place, shutting the drawer silently. I was standing by the bookshelf, examining family photos, when Rebecca appeared in the doorway. "Dad? What are you doing in here?" I turned, forcing a smile. "Just looking at this picture of your graduation. Your mother was so proud that day." Rebecca's face softened. "She was. I remember how she kept taking photos until you told her she'd use up all the film." "Digital cameras were still new back then," I said, replacing the frame on the shelf. "She didn't trust them yet." Rebecca laughed, but there was something guarded in her expression. "Were you looking for the bathroom?" "It's the other door." "Right," I said, moving toward the door. "Senior moment, I guess." I saw the flash of calculation in her eyes at those words, and it chilled me. My own daughter was collecting evidence of mental decline that didn't exist. As I drove home that night, my mind was racing. The file had confirmed my worst fears. My children, or at least Rebecca and Eric, were planning to take control of my assets, possibly through guardianship if they could convince a court I was no longer competent. The notes mentioned my increasing forgetfulness and concerning behavior, none of which was true. The pain of this betrayal was almost physical, a weight crushing my chest. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a long time, looking at the home where I'd raised my family. Where Sarah and I had built our life together. The home my children now saw as nothing more than a financial asset to be liquidated. I thought about confronting them directly, demanding an explanation. But something held me back. If they were willing to go this far already, who knew what they might do if challenged? No, I needed to be smarter than that. I needed to protect myself while I figured out just how deep this betrayal went. As I finally went inside, I resolved to do whatever it took to understand the full scope of their plans. And then, only then, would I decide how to respond. One thing was certain, I wouldn't be signing anything without knowing exactly what it was. The irony of Rebecca's words wasn't lost on me. She thought I wouldn't realize what I was signing. But now, I was wide awake. The next morning, I called Mike, my former foreman who'd bought the business from me. "Hey, Martin," he answered warmly. "How's retirement treating you?" "Can't complain," I said, the lie coming easily. "Listen, Mike, I need a favor. You still use Jackson and Partners for your company's legal work?" "Sure do. Harold Jackson's been handling our contracts for years, just like when you owned the place." "Why do you ask?" "I need some legal advice," I said. "Personal matter." "Can you put me in touch with Harold?" "Of course. Is everything okay, Martin?" Mike's concern was genuine, reminding me that not everyone in my life was plotting against me. "Just some estate planning questions," I said, keeping my tone casual. "Nothing urgent." 2 days later, I sat in Harold Jackson's office in downtown Boston, laying out everything I'd discovered. Harold had been my business attorney for over 20 years, and if there was anyone I trusted with this situation, it was him. "Let me get this straight," Harold said, leaning back in his leather chair. "You overheard your daughter saying you wouldn't realize what you were signing, then found documents suggesting they're planning to challenge your competency?" "That's right," I confirmed. "And they've been pushing me to sell my house and invest the proceeds in their new property. With an in-law apartment for me." Harold's expression darkened. "Unfortunately, this isn't the first time I've seen this sort of thing. Adult children get impatient waiting for their inheritance, especially when there's valuable real estate involved." "What can I do?" I asked. "I'm not giving up my independence or my property, but I don't want to lose my kids either. There must be some middle ground." "First things first," Harold said, pulling out a legal pad. "We need to protect your assets and your autonomy. I'd recommend updating your estate plan immediately, with specific provisions to address any potential challenges to your competency." For the next hour, we discussed strategies, a new will with clear provisions about my mental state, a healthcare proxy that named a trusted friend rather than my children, financial protections for my assets. Harold also recommended I get a complete medical evaluation from an independent doctor to establish my cognitive capabilities beyond any doubt. "One more thing," Harold said as our meeting wound down. "Start keeping a journal. Document everything, conversations with your children, any pressure they put on you, any documents they ask you to sign. If this does end up in court, that documentation will be invaluable." I nodded, feeling both more secure and profoundly sad. I'd come to a lawyer to protect myself from my own children. How had it come to this? "And Martin," Harold added, his voice gentler, "consider talking to them directly before this goes any further. There might be a misunderstanding, or they might back down once they realize you're onto them." I shook my head. "Not yet. I want to understand exactly what they're planning first." "Knowledge is power, right?" "Right," Harold agreed, though he looked troubled. "Just be careful. Family conflicts can spiral quickly." As I left Harold's office, I felt a strange mix of emotions: anger at my children's betrayal, grief for what had been lost, but also a growing determination. I wouldn't be a victim in this story. I'd spent my life building things, solving problems, overcoming obstacles. This was just one more challenge to face. I stopped at an office supply store on the way home and bought a journal, a simple black notebook with lined pages. That night, I began documenting everything I could remember about Rebecca's phone call, the file I'd found, and the Sunday dinner conversation. It felt good to get it all down on paper, to transform swirling thoughts and emotions into concrete facts. Over the next few days, I continued my normal routine while quietly taking steps to protect myself. I scheduled appointments with my regular doctor and a neurologist recommended by Harold for comprehensive cognitive evaluations. I gathered all my financial records and legal documents, making copies to store in a safe deposit box that only I could access. I made a list of all my accounts, properties, and assets, ensuring I had a complete picture of my financial situation. And I waited for the next move from my children, which came sooner than I expected. 3 days after our Sunday dinner, Rebecca called. "Dad," she said brightly, "Eric and I would love to take you to lunch tomorrow. There's something important we want to discuss with you." "Oh?" I kept my tone neutral. "What's that?" "Just some ideas about the future," she said vaguely. "That new bistro on Main Street at noon?" "Sounds good," I agreed. "I'll see you there." After hanging up, I immediately called Harold. "They want to meet for lunch tomorrow," I explained. "To discuss the future." "Be careful," Harold warned. "Don't sign anything, no matter how innocuous it seems. And remember to document everything afterward." The next day, I arrived at the bistro 5 minutes early, choosing a table in the corner where we wouldn't be overheard. Rebecca and Eric walked in right at noon, both dressed in business attire despite it being Saturday. Rebecca kissed my cheek while Eric gave me a firm handshake that felt more like a business transaction than a family greeting. "You look well, Dad," Rebecca said as they sat down. "Have you been getting more sleep?" "About the same as always," I replied. "How's work?" We made small talk through ordering and the arrival of our drinks. Finally, as the server placed our meals in front of us, Eric cleared his throat. "Martin, we wanted to talk to you about something important," he began, using my first name as he always did, never Dad or even Mr. Caldwell. "We've been thinking a lot about your situation," Rebecca jumped in. "Living alone in that big house, all the maintenance, the stairs." "I manage just fine," I said mildly, taking a bite of my sandwich. "Of course you do," she said quickly. "But we worry about the future. What if you fell? What if something happened?" I set down my sandwich. "I appreciate the concern, but I'm not an invalid. I'm still working out 3 times a week at the senior center gym, and my balance is excellent according to my physical therapist." Eric exchanged a glance with Rebecca before reaching into his briefcase. "We've been looking into some options for you," he said, pulling out a folder. "This is the property in Newton I mentioned. It has a beautiful in-law suite with its own entrance, kitchen, everything you'd need." He slid glossy real estate photos across the table. The house was impressive, a large colonial with manicured grounds. The in-law suite appeared to be a converted garage, nice enough but clearly an afterthought to the main house. "It's a great investment opportunity," Eric continued. "Property values in Newton are projected to increase significantly over the next 5 years." "For who?" I asked pointedly. Eric blinked. "What do you mean? Whose name would be on the deed to this property?" Rebecca jumped in. "Well, since Eric and I would be getting the mortgage, it would technically be in our names. But you'd have a lifetime right to occupy the in-law suite." "I see," I said, pushing the photos back across the table. "And what happens to the proceeds from selling my house?" Another glance between them. "You'd contribute that to the down payment," Eric said. "It would reduce the mortgage significantly. So I give up my home and all the equity I've built over 30 years, and in return, I get to live in your garage?" Rebecca flinched. "Dad, it's not like that. It's a beautiful space, and you'd be close to us. We could have dinner together more often, and when you need help." "If I need help," I corrected. "Right, she conceded. "We just want what's best for you." "And what about the cabin?" I asked. "What are your plans for that?" They exchanged another look, and I could almost see their mental calculations. "The cabin is so remote," Rebecca said. "Honestly, Dad, it might be better to sell it. You could use the money for other things." "Like what?" "Travel, hobbies, whatever you want," she said quickly. "You've worked hard all your life. You should enjoy your retirement." I took a sip of water, buying time. "And if I don't want to sell either property?" Eric's expression hardened slightly. "Martin, I know this is difficult to hear, but at your age, managing 2 properties is a lot. We're concerned about your ability to handle everything, especially given what Dr. Lewis said." That caught me off guard. "What exactly did Dr. Lewis say?" Rebecca reached across the table, placing her hand on mine in a gesture that once would have seemed affectionate but now felt calculated. "He called us after your last appointment. He's concerned about early signs of cognitive decline. Nothing serious yet, but something we should prepare for." The lie was so blatant it took my breath away. I had spoken with Dr. Lewis myself just yesterday, confirming that he had shared no such information with my children and that his evaluation showed no cognitive concerns. "Is that so?" I said, working to keep my voice steady. "Funny, that's not what he told me." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Rebecca's face. "Well, doctors often downplay concerns when speaking directly to patients. They don't want to worry you. I see, I said, pulling my hand away from hers. And what exactly are you proposing as a solution to this alleged cognitive decline? Eric pulled another document from his briefcase. We think it would be prudent for you to sign a durable power of attorney. Just as a precaution. It would allow Rebecca to help manage your affairs if you become unable to do so. And there it was, exactly what I'd been waiting for. I took the document he slid across the table, pretending to scan it. This seems very comprehensive, I observed. It would give Rebecca control over all my finances, properties, medical decisions, everything, essentially. Only if needed, Rebecca rushed to assure me. It's just a safety net, Dad. I folded the document and placed it in my jacket pocket. I'll need to review this carefully. Maybe have my lawyer look it over. Your lawyer? Eric looked surprised. That's not really necessary. Our attorney drew this up, it's a standard form. Nevertheless, I said firmly. I've always believed in reading the fine print. You taught me that, didn't you, Rebecca? When you were helping me review contracts for the business? She had the grace to look uncomfortable. Of course, Dad. Take your time. One more question, I said, my tone casual. Who was on the phone with you last week when you said, he won't even realize what he's signing? The color drained from Rebecca's face. Eric's expression remained neutral, but his hand tightened around his water glass. I don't know what you're talking about, Rebecca stammered. I think you do, I said quietly. I was in your hallway, coming back from the bathroom. You were in your office with the door ajar. You said, he won't even realize what he's signing. The lawyer says once it's done, it's done. We'll handle Dad better than Mom did. Care to explain what that meant? Eric stepped in smoothly. You must have misheard, Martin. Or perhaps misunderstood the context. I don't think so, I replied, standing up. I think I understood perfectly. And I won't be signing anything today or anytime soon. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've lost my appetite. I placed enough cash on the table to cover my meal and walked out, ignoring Rebecca's calls to come back. My hands were shaking as I got into my car, a mixture of rage and heartbreak washing over me. I'd hoped, somehow, that there would be an innocent explanation. That I'd misinterpreted what I'd heard. But their reactions had confirmed everything. On the drive home, I called Harold and filled him in on what had happened. This is concerning, he said when I finished. But at least now we know what we're dealing with. Bring that power of attorney document to my office on Monday. I want to see exactly what they were trying to get you to sign. What happens next? I asked. Now we go on the offensive, Harold replied. It's time to secure your assets and make it clear to your children that you're fully competent and aware of what they're trying to do. The confrontation at the bistro had forced my hand. I no longer had the luxury of waiting and watching. It was time to act. The following week was a blur of appointments and paperwork. I met with Harold multiple times, creating a comprehensive estate plan that would protect my assets from any attempt to declare me incompetent. I underwent extensive cognitive and physical evaluations, collecting documentation from multiple doctors confirming my mental acuity and physical health. I changed the beneficiaries on my life insurance policies and retirement accounts, removing Rebecca and Eric entirely. Daniel had called several times, clearly having heard from his sister about our confrontation. I kept our conversations brief and non-committal, not yet ready to determine if he was part of the plot or just on the periphery. The hurt was still too raw, the betrayal too fresh. 10 days after the bistro incident, I was ready for the next phase of my plan. I called both my children and invited them to dinner at my house, neutral territory where I would have the home field advantage. We need to clear the air, I told them. Sunday at 6. Just the three of us. They both agreed, though Rebecca sounded wary. I spent the day before cooking Sarah's lasagna recipe, a Caesar salad, and apple pie from scratch. Cooking had become my therapy since retirement, a way to feel connected to Sarah and to fill the empty hours. By the time the doorbell rang on Sunday evening, I felt as prepared as I could be. Daniel arrived first, giving me a tight hug that felt genuine. "Dad, I've been worried about you," he said as he hung up his coat. "I'm fine," I assured him. "Better than fine, actually." Rebecca arrived 5 minutes later, her expression guarded. She offered a perfunctory kiss on the cheek but didn't meet my eyes. I served drinks in the living room, beer for Daniel, white wine for Rebecca, scotch for myself. We made awkward small talk about the weather and Daniel's daughter's school play until I decided it was time to cut to the chase. "I asked you both here because we need to talk about what happened at the bistro," I began. "And about what's been going on behind my back." Rebecca shifted uncomfortably. Daniel looked confused. "What happened at the bistro?" he asked, glancing between Rebecca and me. "Your sister and Eric tried to get me to sign over power of attorney," I explained. "After trying to convince me to sell my house and invest the proceeds in their new property." Daniel's eyebrows shot up. "Is that true, Becca?" Rebecca's face flushed. "You're making it sound sinister, Dad." "We were trying to help." "By lying about Dr. Lewis's assessment of my cognitive function?" I challenged. "By making plans to take control of my assets without my knowledge or consent?" "What?" Daniel looked genuinely shocked. "Becca, you said Dad was having memory issues. You said the doctor was concerned." "He is concerned," Rebecca insisted. "Dad's just in denial." I stood up and retrieved a folder from the desk in the corner of the room. "I met with Dr. Lewis twice in the past 2 weeks," I said, pulling out a letter. "Here's his official assessment of my cognitive function, which he has permitted me to share with you. There are no concerns, no signs of decline, nothing that would warrant the kind of intervention you were planning." I handed the letter to Daniel, who skimmed it quickly, his expression growing more troubled. "There's more," I continued, pulling out another document. "This is a report from Dr. Elaine Chen, a neurologist specializing in geriatric cognition. She conducted a comprehensive evaluation and found my cognitive function to be above average for my age group." Rebecca's face had gone pale. "Dad, we were just worried." "No," I cut her off. "You were plotting. I heard you on the phone, Rebecca. He won't even realize what he's signing. Remember saying that? And I found your file. The one labeled Dad, Options. The one with all the notes about the value of my house and the cabin." Daniel turned to his sister. "Is this true? Were you trying to take control of Dad's money?" Rebecca's composure cracked. "You don't understand. Eric's investment firm is struggling. We need capital to stay afloat, and Dad's just sitting on all these assets. He doesn't need a 4-bedroom house or a cabin he visits twice a month. It doesn't make financial sense." "It's not about financial sense," I said quietly. "It's about respect. It's about family. It's about honoring the life your mother and I built, not treating it like an ATM for your husband's failing business." "That's not fair," Rebecca protested, tears welling in her eyes. "We've been under so much pressure. The mortgage, Emily's private school tuition, Eric's business issues. We just needed some help." "Then you should have asked for help," I replied. "Directly, honestly. Not schemed behind my back to take everything I've worked for." A heavy silence fell over the room. Daniel looked shell-shocked, Rebecca tearful but also defiant. "So what happens now?" Daniel finally asked. I took a deep breath. "I've made some changes to my estate plan," I said. "Harold Jackson is now my attorney. I've set up irrevocable trusts for both of your children's education. The rest of my estate will go to charity upon my death, with the exception of the cabin, which will go to Mike Turner and his family. They've always appreciated it more than either of you." Rebecca's head snapped up. "You can't be serious. You're disinheriting your own children?" "I'm protecting what Sarah and I built," I corrected. "And ensuring it goes to people who respect our legacy." "Dad, please," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "I didn't know what Rebecca and Eric were planning. Don't punish me for their mistakes." I looked at my son, searching his face for signs of deception. "Were you part of this, Daniel? Be honest with me." He shook his head vehemently. "No. Rebecca told me you were having memory problems and that we needed to start thinking about your care. That's all I knew." "I swear." I nodded slowly. "I believe you. And I'm willing to reconsider your position in my will if you can prove your intentions are sincere." "How?" he asked. "Time will tell," I said simply. "As for you, Rebecca," I turned to my daughter, who was now openly crying, "you have a lot to make up for." Starting with an explanation of exactly what you and Eric were planning, and a genuine apology. "You're being ridiculous," she snapped, wiping at her tears. Eric was right. "You're too stubborn and old-fashioned to see that we were trying to help." "By deceiving me? By trying to take control of everything I own? That's not help, Rebecca. That's theft." She stood up abruptly. "I don't have to listen to this. You've always been impossible to please, always holding us to your impossibly high standards. Mom was the only one who could ever reason with you." The mention of Sarah sent a jolt of pain through me. "Don't bring your mother into this," I warned. "She would be heartbroken by what you've done." "You don't know that," Rebecca shot back. "She might have understood that sometimes families have to make tough decisions for the greater good." "The greater good?" I repeated incredulously. "Is that what you call taking my home and my savings to bail out Eric's business?" Rebecca grabbed her purse. "This conversation is pointless. Call me when you're ready to be reasonable." She stormed out, the front door slamming behind her. Daniel and I sat in stunned silence for a moment. "I'm sorry, Dad," he finally said. "I had no idea it had gone this far." "I want to believe you," I said wearily. "But trust is hard to rebuild once it's broken." Daniel nodded solemnly. "I understand. What can I do to prove I wasn't part of this?" I considered the question carefully. "Give me time," I said. "And distance yourself from your sister's schemes. If she approaches you about me or my assets, let me know immediately." "I will," he promised. "And Dad, for what it's worth, I think Mom would be proud of how you're standing up for yourself." The comment brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I'd been so focused on the betrayal that I hadn't considered what Sarah would think of how I was handling it. She had always been my moral compass, my partner in all decisions. Would she approve of my approach? Or would she urge more forgiveness, more understanding? After Daniel left, I sat alone in the living room, looking at the family photos on the mantel. Sarah's smile beamed back at me from every frame, alongside images of Rebecca and Daniel at various ages, graduations, birthdays, holidays. A visual record of what I thought was a happy, united family. The pain of Rebecca's betrayal was still sharp, but now it was accompanied by determination. I wouldn't let her or Eric take what Sarah and I had built together. And I wouldn't let this betrayal define the rest of my life. There had to be a path forward, one that protected what was mine while leaving room for reconciliation if that ever became possible. In the days that followed, I threw myself into action. With Harold's guidance, I completed the legal restructuring of my assets. I set up a trust for the house that would allow me to live in it for the remainder of my life, after which it would be sold and the proceeds donated to the Cancer Research Foundation that had supported Sarah during her illness. I did the same for the cabin, with provisions for Mike and his family to use it whenever they wished, both during my lifetime and after. I changed the locks on both properties and installed security systems. I moved my banking to a new institution and set up alerts for any unusual activity. I made copies of all my medical evaluations and legal documents, storing them in multiple secure locations. I was building a fortress around my life and assets, determined that no one would be able to exploit me. Through it all, I continued to document everything in my journal, conversations, actions taken, emotional responses. The journal had become both a legal record and a form of therapy, a way to process the complex emotions this situation had triggered. Daniel called regularly, making an effort to stay connected. Our conversations were cautious at first, but gradually became more natural. He kept his promise to inform me when Rebecca approached him about Dad's situation, which she did several times in the weeks following our confrontation. "She wanted me to talk to you about reconsidering the changes to your will," Daniel told me during one of our calls. I told her it wasn't my place to get involved. "Thank you for letting me know," I said, adding the information to my journal after we hung up. Rebecca made several attempts to contact me directly, calls, texts, even a letter delivered by courier. I maintained my distance, unwilling to engage until I received a genuine acknowledgement of what she'd done and a sincere apology. Neither was forthcoming. Instead, her communications oscillated between tearful pleas about family unity and thinly veiled threats about potential legal action. "Dad, please call me back," one voicemail said. "Eric knows people who can challenge these new trusts you've set up. It doesn't have to be this way." I forwarded each message to Harold, who assured me my legal position was secure. "Let them try," he said confidently. "We have overwhelming evidence of your competence and their attempts to manipulate you." 3 weeks after our confrontation dinner, I was working in the yard when a car I didn't recognize pulled into my driveway. A middle-aged woman in a business suit emerged, carrying a briefcase. "Mr. Caldwell," she called as she approached. "My name is Diane Mercer. I'm a social worker with Adult Protective Services. We received a report of possible elder abuse and exploitation. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" My heart sank. So this was Rebecca's next move, reporting me as an endangered elder. I invited Ms. Mercer inside, offered her coffee, and calmly explained the situation, showing her my medical evaluations and legal documentation. "This is unusual," she admitted after reviewing everything. "Typically, we see cases where elders are being exploited, not where they're taking such thorough steps to protect themselves. My daughter and her husband tried to take advantage of me," I explained. "I'm simply ensuring it doesn't happen again." "May I ask who filed the report?" I inquired as she prepared to leave. Ms. Mercer hesitated. "Reports are confidential, but I can tell you it came from a family member concerned about undue influence from your attorney." I nodded grimly. "My daughter, Rebecca. She's upset because I've restructured my estate to prevent her from accessing it." "Well, Mr. Caldwell," Ms. Mercer said as she handed me her card, "based on our conversation and these documents, I'll be closing this case. But please call me if you ever do need assistance." After she left, I called Harold immediately. "Rebecca reported me to Adult Protective Services," I told him. "Claimed you were exerting undue influence." Harold sighed heavily. "I was afraid they might try something like this." "How did it go?" The social worker seemed satisfied with my explanation and documentation. Said she'd closed the case. "Good, but document everything about the visit in your journal. If they try this route again, we'll have a record." The APS visit marked a turning point in my approach to the situation. Until then, I'd been primarily defensive, protecting my assets, documenting events, waiting for Rebecca to come to her senses. But now I realized I needed to take more decisive action. The next day, I drove to Rebecca and Eric's house, timing my visit for when I knew Eric would be at work. Rebecca looked shocked when she opened the door to find me standing on her porch. "Dad," she said, her voice uncertain. "I've been trying to reach you." "I know," I replied. "May I come in?" She stepped aside, leading me to the kitchen where we had sat for countless family meals in happier times. The house was quiet, their daughter must have been at school. "Would you like coffee?" she offered tentatively. "No, thank you. This won't take long." Rebecca sat across from me, her hands fidgeting with a napkin. She looked tired, I noticed, with dark circles under her eyes. "I know you reported me to Adult Protective Services," I began without preamble. Her eyes widened. "How did you?" "The social worker came to see me yesterday," I continued. I showed her my medical evaluations and explained the situation. "She's closing the case." Rebecca looked down at her hands. "We were worried about you." "No, you weren't," I said firmly. "You were worried about losing access to my money." "That's not fair," she protested weakly. "What's not fair is trying to declare your fully competent father incapacitated so you can take control of his assets," I countered. "What's not fair is lying to doctors, filing false reports, and trying to manipulate me into signing away my rights." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand how hard things have been for us. Eric's business." "I understand perfectly," I cut her off. "And if you had come to me honestly, explained your financial difficulties, and asked for help, we might be having a very different conversation right now. Instead, you chose deception and manipulation." She wiped at her tears. "So why are you here?" I took a deep breath. "To give you one last chance to make this right. Tell me the truth, Rebecca. All of it. What exactly were you and Eric planning? How far were you willing to go?" For a moment, she looked like she might continue the denials and deflections. Then something in her seemed to crumble. "It was Eric's idea at first," she said quietly. "His investment firm lost a major client, and we were overextended on the mortgage, Emily's school. He said it didn't make sense for you to be sitting on so much equity when we needed it now." I nodded, encouraging her to continue. "We thought if we could get power of attorney, we could sell your house and the cabin, put you in a nice senior apartment, and use the rest to stabilize our finances. Eric said it was just accelerating our inheritance, that you wouldn't miss the money since you live so frugally anyway." "And the phone call I overheard? About me not realizing what I was signing?" Rebecca looked ashamed. "That was about the power of attorney. Eric found a lawyer who suggested we could present it as a healthcare directive, something routine that you wouldn't read carefully." "And the comment about handling me better than your mother did?" She hesitated. Mom refused to put the cabin in our names before she died. Eric thought she was being stubborn, but I knew she was protecting your retirement dream. I guess we thought we could be more persuasive with you." The confirmation of their plan, spoken in Rebecca's own words, was both vindicating and heartbreaking. My suspicions had been correct, they had been plotting to take everything. "Thank you for finally being honest," I said, my voice steady despite the emotion churning inside me. "Now I need you to understand something. I've spent my entire life working to build security for myself and for this family. Your mother and I sacrificed countless times to give you and Daniel everything you needed. We paid for your education, your first car, your wedding. We were always there when you needed help." Rebecca nodded, tears streaming down her face. "So to discover that you see me as nothing more than a financial resource to be exploited, that you were willing to falsely claim I'm incompetent to get your hands on my assets, that cuts deeper than you can imagine." "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered. "We were desperate, and it clouded my judgment." "I want to believe that," I said. "But trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. So here's what happens now. The legal changes to my estate are permanent. The house and cabin will remain in trusts, and neither you nor Eric will ever control them or benefit from them. Rebecca's face fell, but she nodded in resignation. However, I continued, I'm willing to offer you a loan, not a gift, to help with your financial situation. With proper documentation, reasonable interest, and a payment plan that you and Eric will adhere to. Harold is drawing up the paperwork now. Her head snapped up in surprise. You'd still help us? After everything? You're my daughter, I said simply. I don't approve of what you did, and I may never fully trust you again, but I don't want to see you suffer if I can prevent it. The loan comes with conditions, though. You and Eric will attend financial counseling. You'll be transparent about your finances going forward. And you'll never, ever, try to take advantage of me again. Rebecca stared at me for a long moment, then broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. I don't deserve your help, she managed between sobs. Maybe not, I agreed. But Sarah would want me to offer it anyway. She always believed in second chances. The mention of her mother seemed to break something open in Rebecca. She told me everything then, how Eric's business had been struggling for years, how they'd refinanced the house twice, how they were on the verge of losing everything. The plan to access my assets had been born of desperation, she insisted, though she acknowledged that didn't excuse it. By the time I left, we had reached a tentative understanding. The damage to our relationship was severe, perhaps irreparable in some ways, but we had taken the first small step toward a new kind of relationship, one based on honesty and clear boundaries rather than the blind trust I'd previously given her. Over the following months, things slowly evolved. Daniel and I grew closer, our weekly calls expanding to regular dinners and fishing trips to the cabin. He introduced me to online dating, insisting that at 67, I was far too young to be alone forever. I created a profile more to humor him than anything else, but to my surprise, I actually enjoyed chatting with a few women my age who shared my interests. Rebecca and Eric accepted the loan and its conditions. Our relationship remained strained, but civil. They attended financial counseling as required and began the slow process of restructuring their finances. Eric eventually had to close his investment firm, taking his salaried position at a larger company instead, a blow to his pride but ultimately a more stable situation for their family. As for me, I found a new sense of peace with my situation. The betrayal had been painful, but the aftermath had clarified what truly mattered to me, my autonomy, my principles, and the legacy Sarah and I had built together. I continued to improve the cabin, eventually installing solar panels that made it self-sufficient even during New Hampshire's harsh winters. I spent more time there, finding solace in the quiet natural surroundings and the memories of happier times with Sarah. A year after the confrontation with Rebecca, I met Elaine through the online dating site Daniel had helped me join. A retired librarian with a quick wit and a love of the outdoors, she brought unexpected joy back into my life. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and shared interests. When I finally told her the full story of what had happened with Rebecca and Eric, she listened without judgment. You handled it with more grace than most would have, she observed. Finding a way to help them while still protecting yourself. Sarah would have done the same, I said. Elaine smiled. She sounds like an extraordinary woman. I wish I could have known her. Me too, I replied. She would have liked you. 2 years after I overheard that fateful phone call, I sat on the dock at the cabin, watching the sunset over the lake. Daniel and his family were visiting for the weekend, his daughter skipping stones across the water's surface while his wife prepared dinner inside. Elaine sat beside me, her hand comfortably in mine. Rebecca and her family had visited the previous weekend, a separate invitation by mutual agreement, as the tension between the siblings remained. The visits with Rebecca were still somewhat awkward, but improving gradually. Her daughter, now a teenager, loved the cabin and spent hours exploring the woods and swimming in the lake. Eric remained formal but respectful, the humbling of his financial ambitions having tempered some of his arrogance. "Penny for your thoughts," Elaine said, squeezing my hand. I smiled. just thinking about how different things turned out than I expected. When I first heard Rebecca on that phone call, I thought I'd lost my family forever. Instead, you found a way forward, she observed. Not perfect, but real. Real, I agreed. That's what matters in the end. Not the fantasy of a perfect family, but the reality of one that's weathered storms and still stands. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, I felt a sense of gratitude wash over me. The betrayal had nearly broken me, but in responding to it, I discovered my own strength. I'd protected what mattered, extended compassion where I could, and built new connections that enriched my life. He won't even realize what he's signing, Rebecca had said that day, not knowing I was listening. She'd been wrong. I had realized exactly what was happening, and in that realization had found not just the power to protect myself, but the wisdom to forge a new path forward. A path that honored everything Sarah and I had built together, while making room for healing and new beginnings. The lake water lapped gently against the dock. Behind us, I could hear laughter from the cabin as Daniel's wife called everyone for dinner. Elaine stood, tugging me to my feet. "Come on," she said. "Your family's waiting." I nodded, taking one last look at the sunset before turning toward the warm light of the cabin. My family, imperfect, wounded, healing, but still my family. And in protecting what Sarah and I had built, I'd found not just security, but a deeper understanding of what truly mattered: dignity, boundaries, forgiveness, and the courage to stand up for myself, even against those I loved most. "I'm coming," I said, and together we walked toward the light. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.